Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. This is a meeting to consider applications for minor variance and consents that is held under the authority of the Planning Act of Ontario. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the proposal that's before us, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or any other organization. If a request for a deferral is made this evening, the committee grants such a request. The committee, after consultation with our Secretary Treasurer, will set a new hearing date. No further notice will be provided unless there are changes to the application. In order to conduct an effective and efficient hearing, we've adopted the following process. The owner or authorized agent will be given the opportunity, if so desired, to briefly explain to us the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise out of the hearing. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for this presentation. You need to state your full name and address for the record. Any material submitted to committee for viewing will remain the property of this committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of this committee. All persons attending the hearing who wish to support or oppose the application must also state their full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to make your presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chairperson of the committee, and any submissions, again, beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of this committee. If there are several speakers that share the same view, we ask that you select a spokesperson to present the group's combined opinion. We want to hear all the views, but covering the same points doesn't necessarily help us to arrive at a quicker decision. The owner or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to comments made by any interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the owner or agent has any concerns found in the staff report, particularly with any of the proposed conditions, this will be your opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken to the committee for a decision. This will mark the end of all presentation from the floor. Once the committee makes an oral decision, any person desiring a copy of this decision must file with the Secretary Treasurer at this meeting a written request for notice of the decision. A green sheet is provided to your right, my left. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included on the list that is used by the Ontario Municipal Board, as it's currently known, for the given any subsequent notice of any appeal. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed not later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consents of the applicant, the owner and or agent, and any other person who filed a written request for such notice. If you do not agree with our decision, you may appeal this to the Ontario Municipal Board. The last day to appeal our decision to the Ontario Municipal Board will be noted on the decision itself. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of this committee becomes final and binding. The Secretary Treasurer will then notify the applicant through written correspondence. People attending the committee meeting tonight are to be courteous to, respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and other people in attendance tonight. And just for everyone's information, tonight's meeting will be live streamed and available for future viewing on the town's live stream webpage at oakville.ca/live. And we ask if you could put your cellular phones or pagers on silent during the course of this hearing. Thank you. We have no regrets this evening. Any pecuniary interest on any matters? Okay, I do. I have pecuniary interest on the first item, and I'll recuse myself. I work with the firm that filed the application. Is there anyone here this evening that wishes to defer or withdraw an application? Defer? Okay. Come on forward, and this is a matter that I think I need to recuse myself. So let me leave, and Sherry, can you do that, and then just someone yell at me when you're ready?
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mohsen Zakaria from Penalty Group. We are the agent for the applicant 2575855 Ontario Inc. For this application CAV A-188-2017. Due to some changes that the site plan application is going through at the moment and the possibility of request for other variances, we would like to request deferment of this hearing for now, and we can reapply afterwards.
Very well, thank you. Members, are there any concerns or questions? See none. Or those in so, are there any members in the audience who? I've turned it on.
Maybe move it.
You have to move it closer.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, is this okay?
Better now.
Thank you. Okay. Is that okay?
That's as good as it gets.
Okay.
I just have to talk close to it.
Okay. Sorry, I apologize for that, folks. Who is here for application CAV 188 of 2017 for 407 Iroquois Shore Road? No? Okay, so I see no one in the audience who's here of interest. Members, I mean, your hands. The applicant is requesting deferral to work on the application and come back once that has done. All those in support of the deferral? Okay, thank you. Your application has been deferred. You're going to have to see the Secretary Treasurer for the next available date. Okay. Do you mind calling for Paul? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Well then, anyone else here wishing to withdraw a deferred item? Okay. Is item number 4 withdrawn? Do we know for sure?
Oh, sorry, yes, was, that's why I put withdrawn on here.
Okay,
Sorry.
so we have anyone here for application CAVA 200 2017? This is the application at 2441 Lakeshore Road West.
For the retail trailer. 'Cause there's
Retail
two-
trailer,
Because
right.
there's 2 for that address. Okay.
Okay, that one is being withdrawn.
John?
Yes, for the retail trailer. Yes. Yes. Okay, so that application is no longer before us. Okay, so we have one deferral and one withdrawal, I guess. Okay, so we'll start with application B1708. And this is a concurrent application for minor variance, CAVA 166-2017. This is at 114 Balsam Drive. Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is David Capper with Glenn Schnorr and Associates. Our mailing address is Unit 700 at 10 Kingsbridge Garden Circle, Mississauga, Ontario, L5R 3K6. And I'm here this evening on behalf of Pauline and Dennis Dewan, who are the owners of the property at 114 Balsam Drive in Oakville.
Okay, sir, just before you commence, let's see if there's a full presentation required. Is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in these two applications, CAVA 166-2017, which is the minor variance, and consent application B1708, both for 114 Balsam Drive? Okay. Sir, if you could proceed with the presentation, we'll do the consent first, and then you can follow up with the variance, and then we'll ask for those who showed an interest to speak to us. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as a procedural matter, was aware that I would not have the ability to do a fancy PowerPoint presentation this evening, so I have printed out copies of the presentation to the chair.
Okay.
There should be one there for each member.
Thank you.
And I'll place the same thing on the document so that everyone can see it.
Close this one. Give everybody a hand up.
I got a tri-normal coffee.
Oh, yeah.
That was good.
Not if you want to live through it.
Apologies for the clarity on the screen. I'm sure
We
that
may need to dim the lights.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Well, harder, just lights.
It's over there.
No, don't touch anything, Paul.
There you go. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Can everyone see?
No.
Okay, those that have an interest can come forward and, make yourself comfortable and have a look. Don't be shy, just move forward and have a look. It's important that you get the full picture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. By way of reference, the subject property is located at 114 Balsam Drive, which is at the northwest corner of Balsam Drive and Lakeshore Road West. Sorry, Lakeshore Road East. As background, the applications that are before you this evening, there's two of them. One is for a consent application to create one.
Sorry, we're just trying to get our technology catching up to you, sir.
Fair enough.
This might be a bit helpful for those that need to see. Wow, we got lots of screens here.
Should have brought the disc with the
How do we get the
presentation.
PowerPoint
I
started?
didn't know they did this even.
So
Sorry,
just continue.
I'll
We'll just
continue
see-
if you don't mind. So the applications before you this evening, there are two of them. One is for a consent application to create a new residential lot, and the other is for a minor variance application for two minor variances. The first is to recognize the existing height of the existing building, and then the second variance is to recognize the location of that building on the new lot that would be created. There are some very unique characteristics of this particular application. In that it allows for the retention of a designated heritage structure, more or less in situ, slightly relocated on the property, while allowing for a sensitive infill development to occur on the severed lot to the north of the property. As I mentioned, there are two variances. One is to recognize the existing height. The building is being lifted up, shifted slightly to the south, and then again to the east. Due to the change of the established grade on the lot, there's a need for the variance for the building height. It's a designated heritage building. It's not increasing in height. It's simply being relocated to a different position on the property. The variance being sought is from 9 meters, which is the maximum permitted, to 10.7 meters. The actual building height surveyed elevation from established grade to the top of the building is 10.5 meters in its existing situation. So the delta is essentially a 20 centimeter increase in building height that is being sought as a result of the variance. As background, there has been a heritage permit application that's been submitted to the town. It's been received by the Heritage Committee and was endorsed for Council's approval. That heritage permit was approved by Council on June 12th of this year, and that was the first part in the process that we engaged in this development application. In terms of the end result of your approval this evening, the image that's in front of you on, I believe it's page 4 of the presentation, is the location of the relocated house with a partial demolition of the rear, and I'll get to another slide showing that in just a second. This is the end scenario that will occur with the relocated building, a detached garage in the northwest corner of the property, and then the the severed lot for just to the north of that. And in terms of the two lots that are being proposed, both lots fully comply with the minimum requirements for the RL1 zone with respect to lot area and lot frontage. As is shown in this slide, the minimum lot area is 1,393.5 meters squared. The retained lot has a lot area of 2,118 square meters, and the severed lot has a lot area of 1,597. Minimum frontage of 40.65 for the retained lot and 30.59 for the severed lot. All those provisions do exceed the minimum requirements for the zone. Additionally, we did submit a planning justification report that did a fairly extensive analysis of the lot areas and frontages in this area of Oakville. The committee is very familiar with a property immediately south of this at 474 Lakeshore, which also went through more or less the same process. Our findings through the analysis for this particular application is that there's a diverse range of lot areas and frontages in the area. There are larger lots and there are smaller lots. But certainly the fact that these two lots both comply with the zoning bylaw, it's ultimately the position put forward in the planning justification report that they're considered to be compatible with the surrounding development. And again, just a summary of the variances that are before you this evening. And I have the next slide will illustrate exactly where these are. This is the first variance to permit a maximum front yard setback of 24.56 meters and to permit a maximum building height of 10.7 meters. So I've discussed in quite a bit of detail the variance for building height. With respect to the maximum front yard setback, there's a provision in the bylaw that requires not only a minimum front yard setback, but a maximum too. And the 24.56 meters is measured to the furthest point of the front facade of the dwelling from the front lot line. Even though this is the designed front of the house, and for all intents and purposes, this, when you drive by Lakeshore, that is going to look like it's the front of the house. By zoning definition, the Balsam Street frontage is the front yard setback. It is the narrower of the two on the flankage in the front yard. So therefore, it is the defined front yard for the property. And due to the fact that the depth of the building sort of terminates here, it's the distance. The variance is required to recognize the distance from here to here, and that distance is 24.56, and it exceeds the maximum front yard setback. And then just very quickly on this map on this figure 2, there are two portions of the original buildings that are on the property right now that are highlighted in yellow. Those are parts of the buildings that are not designated. They're not included in the designating bylaw for the property. And those are parts of the structures that are to be removed as part of the approval of this application. So I think I'm almost running out of time. I'm happy to answer any questions should the committee have them.
Okay, any questions of Mr. Capper at the moment? Sir, would the designated property on the retained lands continue to have the same municipal address, 114?
Mr. Chair, I'm not entirely sure of the answer to that question. I believe the answer is yes. What will occur through the next step in the planning process is that there will be a site plan approval that's required for both the retained and the severed lot. And it's through that application, through the site plan application, that the circulation to I believe it's the engineering services guys downstairs would provide comment. I suspect the answer is yes, though.
Okay, thank you. So, yes, Mr. Charlebois.
Mr. Capper, with respect to the variance, I just need to clarify something. Is the variance only going to apply to the one lot, or is it applying to both? So in the description here, it seems like it's applying to both.
That was a question I had, why I asked a question about municipal numbering, because it seems like the height you need and the variance on the front yard is only with respect to the relocated heritage building.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Yeah.
The reason it's structured the way it is because as a condition of approval for the consent application, you'll note that the demolition of the garage and the additional non-designated part of the structure is required as a condition of approval. So
for what? For the heritage?
Yeah, so as a condition of approval, the building needs to be relocated so that it no longer crosses the property line.
Correct, yes. Understood.
So in order for that to happen, we need a building permit, and that building permit has to comply with the zoning bylaw.
Right.
So at that point in time, it is on the whole of the property as 114 Balsam as it stands right now. So essentially if you are to approve the consent application, the variance will need to be approved first and occur first for the relocation to happen. And then as a condition of approval for the consent application, my client advises the town that the building has been relocated and then fulfills the remainder of the conditions for the consent application.
So have you seen staff's proposed condition?
I have, sir.
And?
I have no concerns, save and except for perhaps a point of clarification. And I,
This is just the condition in respect of the variance, not the conditions of consent approval.
yes, through you, Mr. Chair, I have no concerns with that condition.
So it seems like you need to relocate the building in order to satisfy the variance.
That's correct. And at the appropriate time, I'd like a point of clarification from either the committee or staff with respect to the conditions of approval for the consent application.
Well, here's your chance. I mean,
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask, unless I'm mistaken, there does not appear to be a time frame for, in the conditions of approval for the final approval of the consent application.
well, you have to satisfy your condition within 1 year statutory.
Within, sorry, 1 year.
1 year.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the decision itself.
So I'm wondering if, given the number of things that have to happen here, if there's any opportunity to allow for an extended time frame.
Not under the Planning Act.
Okay. Then through you,
You
Mr.
still
Chair,
have a
we'll have...
chance, you still have a chance to make that submission before the province when they're amending the Planning Act under Bill 139, but you only got a short window to do that.
I think I have a better chance of relocating a heritage house than
Okay.
that happening, sir.
All right, so it's a statutory imposed time limit. We can't alter that, so,
It was worth a try.
yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I just direct back to that question?
Yes.
So at the end of the day, if we approve this variance, the way it's written, the variance gets approved for both lots, which would mean that on the new lot, on the severed lot, you're going to have the same variances?
Kate has
Kate,
No.
you can pop in.
The intent was to confine it to the retained lot or municipal address 114 Balsam is what I asked earlier.
Through you, Mr. Chairman of the committee. It's typical standard practice when dealing with a minor variance application associated with consents is that if a variance were required on both a severed and retained lot, 2 applications for minor variance would have been submitted to address each of the individual parts. In this instance, because the dwelling has to be relocated on the whole of the lands before the consent can actually be given, it is just one variance application to deal with that. If the property address remains the same, which I suspect that it will, as this is the corner lot, it's 114 Balsam, it would stay with this property. This variance would also stay with that property, but it is to recognize the condition that would have happened prior to the consent being finalized. So this variance will have no bearing on the severed portion for the new dwelling. If approved, the new dwelling will have to comply with the regulations of the zoning bylaw today. The variance will not be in effect for that parcel.
But if we wanted to just add to clarity, the proposed condition that recommended by staff is that the proposed dwelling be located in general accordance. We could say that the proposed dwelling on the retained lot.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's actually incorrect.
Okay.
The nature of the condition is that site plan approval be finalized before consent is issued. So the house has to be relocated before we can create a retained and severed parcel. So in order for the final site plan approval to be issued, for the demolition to occur, the dwelling physically has to move on the property as it sits today before we can issue a certificate to have 2 separate conveyable pieces. So if we were to alter the condition of the variance to recognize a retained lot, there is no retained lot at the time that the building permit application would be received for the demo.
Right. So, and you filed for a heritage permit?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've not only filed, we've received endorsement from the Heritage Committee and approval by council for the heritage permit for the relocation of the building.
Right.
As well as, begging your pardon, as well as the demolition of the rear addition, which is not part of the designating bylaw.
You got to alter, you have a heritage permit to alter a designated building, and you've done all that, and you have some sort of
That's
agreement in
correct.
principle, so you have a lot of work to do if this gets approved within a year.
We have some work to do.
Sorry, did I hijack your questions?
No, not at all. I just want to close the loop on that. So the variance is going to be on the entire parcel as it exists today. The house is going to be relocated. Once it's relocated, site plan approval, consent will be granted. As you sever the lots, what happens to the variance that was on the whole lot? Does it travel, or what happens to that retained lot? I just want to close that loop in my mind.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, sorry, there we go. Through you, Mr. Chairman of the committee, the expectation is that once the lot is created, the variance will stick with the retained lands as you've indicated. It has to follow in this particular process in order for that to occur. There is no expectation or any anticipation that the variance would ever stick to the severed land. By nature of the condition that's been provided, there's a site plan application that would be tied to that, but it would never follow that process. So if someone wanted to change the front yard setback or height for the retained or the severed parcel, they would be coming before this committee again for a variance on that new piece.
All right, thank you. Any further questions, Mr. Pulowski?
Just for clarity on that point, would it be an issue if the committee were to make the variance subject to the existing house to be relocated? I share this.
Well, not existing, because the existing won't be the same.
House to be relocated.
That's right.
I share the same concern that Mr. Charlevoix does, that a good lawyer could interpret this as 10.7 applying to both parcels forever.
That's why I like the words on the retained lot.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, you could be more specific with respect to the relocation of the heritage portion of the existing dwelling, if you wanted to have more clarity as to what the variance actually applies to. That would be my suggestion.
Mr. Capper, you understand what we're trying to,
Absolutely, yes, sir.
so,
Okay, I think we're all on the same page. We're just trying to find ways to ensure that what you see is what you get if this gets approved.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could ask for the committee's indulgence, if there is final wording for the condition that's being for either an additional condition or...
It says that the proposed heritage portion of the existing dwelling be relocated in general accordance with the final approved site plan to the satisfactory director of planning services. So is that, you want to write it down?
I got it. Could I ask
The
for...
proposed heritage portion of the existing dwelling.
Could I ask for 30 seconds of your time to confirm this
sure.
with my client? Thank you.
Is there any further questions of Mr. Capper? Okay. Okay, that the heritage portion, of the existing.
You're talking about a condition, the variance is what it is. So you're saying that it applies to...
Yes, sir.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the wording of the condition is, as you've read it, is amenable to my client.
Right, all we're trying to do is to ensure that the variances apply, because right now it's a lot as a whole, and if this was to approve, the variances presumably because they were granted ahead of the consent, someone could interpret down the road,
Yeah.
just to avoid that confusion, to ensure that, everyone's on the same page. Okay.
Through you,
So
Mr. Chair, I understand the concern. I can assure you that the town of Oakville zoning officers are very astute, and I don't even think myself could get away with a 10.7 meter variance on that.
We're just trying to all be consistent.
Fair enough.
Okay, so don't go too far, have a seat in the front there, and we'll
Thank you, sir.
invite you to come back once we hear the concerns of the neighbor. Okay? It appears so.
So my name's Valerie Scott, and I'm at 194 Balsam Drive. and I really have two comments on the proposed relocation. Despite this house having a 114 Balsam Drive address, the house faces Lakeshore. The front door that it appears as the historical house faces Lakeshore. And if you look at the variance towards Lakeshore and the value and prestige of this house, it's smaller than the minimum setback is set by the town, at 14.8 meters. And then the second very significant concern I have is the building itself is very old, and while I believe undue care will be taken to make sure there's a successful relocation, I think that the town should not provide consent for the new lot or keep the a lien on the new lot, because the value of the property is much higher than the property with a structure on it.
Thank you.
Because
Have
we're
you-
probably
yeah.
talking, $3 to $4 million for the land.
Have you had a chance to review the staff report on this and the?
I did read it,
And
yeah.
the conditions on Schedule A for the consent?
I didn't read all the conditions.
Okay, so a couple of conditions, that they require site plan approval.
Yeah.
And through that site plan process, they'll probably ask for securities to ensure that the house
Well,
gets relocated.
I asked them a number of times what the amount of the securities was, and they said, will be determined at some future date.
Correct.
And be given the value of these properties, I think it should be determined early on, because, the building might not survive relocation, but
building-
if there's a very significant repair required, which might be upwards of $1 million, the severed lot could be sold, I'll say, for $2 million.
No, that
And
that
then
can't
it would
happen.
just, and it would just, and in the existing building, whichever repair it's in, could be just left.
No, that can't happen, because the way that it's been structured, you require site plan approval before you can do anything. So before you even
Well,
get
somebody
your-
could give them site plan approval for the new lot.
Well,
I'm just saying.
There's a process for that. There's an application that needs to be filed in through that process. So the way that the conditions have been structured is, you can't get your certificate to create these lots until you meet these conditions. One of the conditions is you need to get site plan. You get your site plan approval, and then that will be all the securities required to protect and to ensure the appropriate
But the house
relocation.
doesn't have to be moved, as I understand it, to get the site plan approval.
Well, it's part of the site plan approval process, but Ms. Kate will answer that.
Well, maybe you could let me know.
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the process in this case is actually twofold. So there is the site plan process, which will provide for securities around grading and drainage, landscaping, et cetera. The heritage permit process, which is under the Ontario Heritage Act, has its own set of criteria on securing the monies and securities for the relocation of the existing building. And it's through that process that those securities, which I believe the resident is speaking of, for the relocation of the building would be secured. Until such time as we actually get to that point, the value of securities and providing for the relocation plan has yet to be determined. So the process being that they've secured their permit, they now go through the site plan application process to deal with the grading and drainage issue, driveway proximity, trees, etc. And once the new location is firm, they will go through the heritage permit process and provide for specific securities. There is an opportunity for those to overlap, so as a site plan agreement, we would take those heritage securities, but it's not required. The two work independently before the building can actually be relocated.
So just on that point, it's,
The condition 9 says you need to get a demolition permit and you need to relocate the structure prior to the issuance of the consent.
Right.
And then condition says you need final site plan approval. And it doesn't say prior to the relocation of the building.
Through you,
So-
Mr. Chair, the process is embedded in itself. They can't receive a building permit to move the building until they get final site plan approval. So the conditions, albeit not in a chronological order of how one would clear them, the process would be that they obtain their final site plan approval, They then proceed with the heritage elements that are required to secure the relocation. So there's a relocation plan and securities that are required to be posted. And the heritage piece is also an item of applicable law. So before a demolition permit can be issued for this heritage building, those pieces need to be firm in order for it to proceed. So the expectation is that given the 1-year time frame of this consent, staff believe that these conditions can be satisfied within the year, the dwelling can be relocated, and the site plan approval can be granted in order to execute the consent.
Okay. Does that help you?
No, I suspect that the building can be relocated. I'm wondering if it can be relocated successfully, so it looks the same. So that was the second part, because that's the part that I don't follow. So it's damaged significantly. Why would it prevent the homeowner from saying, I'll sell the property and get my proceeds, because,
There's a whole bunch of scenarios that could happen.
Yeah, I know.
There's no doubt, but for someone to proceed down this road, they must have examined the building, and we'll hear about it, that it's structurally sound for relocation, otherwise
well,
why
I
go through the
would
process?
expect, that the utmost care would be taken to relocate. I'm
Right.
just thinking of the worst case, because it's a
That's where
priceless piece of Oakville. No, the security part, though, you might say it's 10% of the value of the property, or 50%. Like, I'm just saying that these properties are so valuable that, they're worth more, they're worth more than the whole, as it is right now.
So
That's all.
the alternative is not to do anything.
I guess that would be something that you could consider.
And is that something that you support, just to leave the
Well,
building
I
to
feel
crumble?
bad for the owner. They tried to sell the house, as I understand, and, they weren't successful. And this is a way of them realizing maximum proceeds for the property. And I just want to make sure that if something happens to that house, that, the town has adequate funds to,
No, I guess my point was that the do nothing scenario means that the building continues to experience deterioration with no upkeep. It's already in.
well, what do you mean?
The do nothing means there's, nothing happens, there's a refusal of
Well,
everything.
people live in the house now.
Right, but we all, okay.
People live in the house now, and, the house could be sold. It's just the price, and the reason it probably hasn't been sold is because the historical limitations on selling the house.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions?
And then, so it's just that, and then the 14 meters to Lakeshore Road, because that's how it appears the house fronts. So they're my two comments.
That's just, well, it could be questions, Mr. Sherlin?
I just wanted to clarify one thing, Mr. Chairman, because I think the approval to move the house was granted by the Heritage Committee, and so it has nothing to do with us here as the Committee of Adjustment. I hear your concern, but we're the wrong people. It's the Heritage Committee and Council that have agreed to a plan to move it. All that we're here to do is simply agree that once it's moved, there's going to be a variance.
Well, I
and then
think your
consent.
rules twice. This is twofold. One is the security, and one is the variance to Lakeshore Road.
No, we don't do securities.
We don't do
You don't
security
do
for
that,
the
so
not
that's,
for the Heritage.
so that's on the consent then, when the
No.
lot's
No, that's-
consented to?
That's, Mr. Sherlin was correct. That's something that council will address, and the heritage people that review the heritage permit.
So that will come up again,
Yes.
okay, so
The
then
final
it's
heritage permit, somewhere in the process, we heard that there was.
within that year.
Council's already approved it.
Right, so we heard an approval in principle by council. You have to work out the heritage
Yeah.
agreements and then the site plan.
Okay, so then my only comment is the 14 meters or 14.8 meters fronting on Lakeshore.
I'm not sure.
Because that's the house, the natural
Orientation.
orientation of the house, despite the 114 Balsam address.
Any further questions? Seeing none? Okay. Mr. Capper?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of points, if you'll allow me. The do-nothing scenario. I have to tell you, sir, and my clients can vouch for me, when I first was asked about this property, I met Mr. Dewan and Ms. Dewan on the property, and I told them that this was a very exciting application. This was an opportunity where you could have a sensitive infill application, allowing for intensification, albeit only one lot, but at the same time preserving an existing designated building and giving it more prominence on the retained portion, moving it closer to the Lakeshore Road frontage. So at the time I told them, I was excited to be involved in something that is very different from what I do here at the committee. Oftentimes, it's a full demolition of a building and a rebuild of a monster home, and you guys see me do this all the time. This is very different from that. For the Dewans, this is their house. They do intend to live in this house when it is relocated on the property. For them, this is an all-or-nothing application. All the conditions of approval need to be fulfilled before they can dispose of that lot. So if the building does fall down, they don't get the approval. So as you can imagine, there's going to be significant care and sensitivity that goes into making sure that everything goes right in this application. We have a year to do all this. It is a very tight time frame, and like I said, it is an all-or-nothing scenario for the Dewans. So I implore upon you that concerns regarding eventual development not occurring, that's not an option here. The idea is to get this done as quickly as possible within the time frame, within the mandated time frame, and have everything approved. Worries about the demolition of the existing building. Certainly there are, I'm not a civil engineer. I can't speak to the structural integrity of the building. I do know from being involved in applications where there is potential relocation of heritage buildings, the guys that do this type of work don't do it if there's the threat of the building falling down during the relocation. And it's substantially, through the process, the building is substantially structurally ensured that it won't shift or move or fall apart. And this application, in my mind, has very little to do with the value of the lot, which is mentioned. I think it has, from my perspective, this is a great planning application. I think it's something that deserves an approval from yourselves, and I think it's atypical of what we see in Oakville, and the Dewan should be applauded for that. So for that, that's everything from me.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Mr. Capper? Yes, Mr. Talowski?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Capper, I need to come back and revisit the height issue.
Sure.
I don't think what was discussed earlier about changing the condition solves the problem. I believe the only way to satisfy the committee's concern on the height issue is to actually amend the variance that's been requested to permit a maximum height of 10.7 meters for the dwelling to be relocated. Do you have any concerns if that was the decision of the committee?
Yeah, that's good.
That would legalize your dwelling today, but the 10.7 meter height would only apply to that dwelling and could never be construed to apply to the severed lot.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Talowski, I'm sorry, could you repeat the wording for the variance?
He wants to say to permit a maximum height of 10.7 meters for the relocated dwelling. So the variance on this,
I think at the end of the day,
it's the same thing.
it achieves the same end. From my perspective, if this assures the committee that ultimately you get what you want out of amending the variance versus the condition, you're well aware that you're in the power, that it is in your power to do that in terms of amending the variance. So as I have no concerns as long as you follow the proper protocol in terms of advising that no notice is required to amending the variance. I don't want to get stuck in a procedural matter where you haven't given the necessary notice.
But we're not,
More restrictive.
that's right, it's not adding a variance, it's just tweaking the wording of one variance to reflect what the evidence we heard tonight.
Agreed.
It's noted on the record anyway, so if there's any doubt. Okay, any further questions? All right, we'll take this back to committee. Thank you very much for the
Thank you.
presentation and for your submissions. Who would like to move a recommendation? Let's do the consent first. So this is application B 1708 for 114 Balsam Drive. Who would like to move the recommendation? Mr. Teleski, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully agree with Mr. Capper's assessment of this file. This is an excellent solution. It's actually one of my favorite properties in Old Oakville, and to see that house preserved and given a more prominent location on the lake shore, in my mind, Mr. Chair, absolutely represents good planning and clearly not a situation that requires a plan of subdivision to preserve the house as opposed to the potential of demolition by neglect. Makes a lot of sense to me. So, Mr. Chair, I would, on that basis, recommend approval of this item.
Okay, and you took into consideration the comments and the written comments that were oral and written that were here today, and it meets all the tests under section 5124?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Discussion on recommendation? See none, and you moved Schedule A conditions as well, right?
Sorry, and subject to the conditions recommended by the town and the region.
Okay, thank you. So you heard the resolution or the recommendation. Any discussion? See none, all those in support? No one opposed? The consent's been approved. You want to continue with your variance to A, CAVA 166-2017?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to move approval of amended variances for this application. Be prepared to move approval of variance number 1 and approval of an amended variance number 2 to permit a maximum height of 10.7 meters for the dwelling to be relocated. I find that to be a more restrictive variance than what was given notice. To the concern of the applicant, I don't see that any further notice would be required. I would note on the variance and itself, there were some letters of opposition with respect to the height, but I think the applicant sufficiently described or explained that the height is to recognize an existing condition. It's not a permission to expand the height, and I think with the amendment to the variance number 2, which should satisfy the committee and the community that it is only the existing house that this applies to, and the house on the severed lot will not get an increase in height as a result of this variance. I guess I will also speak to the comment at this point about the house being relocated too close to the lake shore. That's its frontage, but as I said, I think it provides an excellent example of a heritage house at far greater prominence while maintaining it in its general historic context. There was also a comment, Mr. Chair, with respect to the proposed garage on the retained parcel. Just note that that garage is not subject to any of the variances that complies with the bylaw that was built in that manner. And with that, Mr. Chair, move approval of variance number 1 and the amended variance number 2.
Subject to any conditions?
Subject to the conditions requested by staff.
Okay. Well, no, not to change. So we'll go with the condition requested by staff. And I guess the usual typical condition on the 2 years is probably redundant, given that they have to meet the requirements within 1 year. Yes, okay. So you heard the recommendation. Any discussion? See none, all those in support? No one opposed? The application's been approved. Okay, we'll deal with application CAVA 198-2017 at 305 Felon Avenue. Is the agent here for application CAVA 198-2017 for 305? Okay.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we'll need a presentation on this. Name and address for the record.
Peter James Higgins of Peter Higgins Architect Incorporated. Here with me, 124 Merton Street, Suite 204,
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Toronto, Mary, 4, Sam, 2, Zed or Zebra, 2.
Here's your copy. Oh, you got one? Okay, I got one. Okay, you got 5 minutes. Let me know when you are ready to start.
I'm ready to start. Thank you
Okay.
for the opportunity to speak to you. We're looking at CAV A/198/2017, 305 Felon Avenue. I'm here with my clients, Michael and Julie Sorignese, who I'd like them to wave and stand up. They are hoping to build in beautiful Oakville a nice home for their 2 children who are 4 and 7 years of age, and they're wanting to locate in Oakville because it's rated the #1 city in Canada for children. We have met with Kate Mihalovich, the planner in the city, and we've had a number of correspondences with her. We've made several revisions to our plans to satisfy her concerns, and these include reduced coverage to comply, reduced height to comply, set the garage back further from the street, set the entire house back further from the street so as to achieve a proper parking space in front of the garage. There is no length variance. There's no side yard setback variance. In fact, our side yards are 1.37 and 3.06 on the north side versus 1.2 allowable, and we have 1.59, 2.04, and 3.26 on the south side versus 1.2 meter allowable. Second floor structure is substantially set back from the ground floor. We have a number of sketches to show you regarding that. So first, and I've done a little bit of extra highlighting, but if you can turn to the page A5 down in the bottom right-hand corner, it shows the second floor. You will see that the second floor is substantially set back from the ground floor on all sides, a little less so on the south side, but certainly the north, the east, the southeast, and the west. We'd also like to point out that in yellow, we have to include the square footage area, gross floor area, that is in the attic space. We can go to the elevation. The attic space that you cannot use because it's too small, here and here. But we have to count that. If we did not count that unusable space, our number for the FAR would reduce from 47.6 to 46.7. This area, we believe, is required for not only aesthetics and for structure, but it's not usable, and yet we're penalized for it. The roof is completely hipped on all sides. There's a gable in the front and the back, and everything else is dormered. That means, if you understand hipped roofs, there are no vertical sidewalls, or virtually no vertical sidewalls, which add to the mass of the house and affect the neighboring houses. We also have shown the potential for redevelopment for the 2 neighboring houses with the allowable side yard setbacks and height on both sides. We know that the neighborhood is going through transition. These houses will likely be replaced over the next 20 years, and as my clients would like to replace a bungalow on this property. So you can see that if you look at what you could build versus what we're building in terms of the additional side yard setback, the reduced overall massing and height, the pulled down roof, which results on the interior of a bedroom wall that would go up to approximately 7 feet, 6.5 feet, and then angle into the ceiling like a cottage. We've done this design so that it fits the neighborhood. If we can go back to the photographs. There's one example of a very nice design, we believe, at 298 Felon, which employs, again, dormers and small gables, a hipped roof, and a cottage-like feel to it. We think this is a good way to transition from a very modest bungalow on either side to a 2-story house, which is what you're allowed to build. The wall heights are quite low because we're pulling down the roof, particularly over the garage, which really helps with the transition to the existing bungalow on the north side. We have a horizontal front porch, which adds charm, but also, because of its horizontality, minimizes any height, even though we don't have a height variance. All in all, it minimizes the scale of a new house on all sides, all views. You can't see the number. You can't see 42% versus 47.6% versus 46.7%, which is what we have without the attic space. You can't see that from the street. What you can see from the street is scale. Go back to the photographs for a minute.
So you should be wrapping up soon?
Wrapping up very quickly.
Okay.
In the neighborhood, there are examples of two-story houses, new two-story houses, tall gables, etc., square boxes, etc. We're not designing anything like that. We're designing something that we think is very in keeping with the neighborhood. So we don't believe it should be about a number. We believe it should be about scale. I mentioned the existing neighborhood is going through transition, slowly, admittedly, from bungalows and 1.5-story housing stock to 2 stories, which is allowed by the bylaw. I want to point out that you should have on file, we have 3 letters of support from neighbors on the street at 294, 298, and 318 Phelan. Our clients at our direction went door to door to approximately 10 to 12 neighbors, delivered packages similar to the ones that you have received, packages that show the site plan, the facade drawings, the statistics, the reason why we have an overage, etc. They met with success at 3 houses to receive 3 letters back. The neighbor immediately to the south at number 301 was home but entertaining and has not yet had a chance to write a letter. We understand from our clients that they have no issues with the proposal. Others on the street were not at home. We left, or my clients left those packages. We haven't heard from those neighbors, and to my knowledge, to our knowledge, there is no opposition on file.
Okay. Thank you.
Not quite finished, but could I just summarize? I just had one little summary.
Okay, we'll give you a couple more
The
seconds.
proposed house is just over 3,100 square feet versus an allowable of just over 2,800 square feet. It's a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. It's modest. It's a growing young family. We believe we've designed a very handsome home in a great neighborhood. And we've designed this home where the visual scale and massing of the house design absolutely masks the FAR overage. Especially without any other variances, including coverage. We believe this overage is minor, and it meets the 4 tests. And being minor, we believe this proposal should meet, we hope it will meet, with your approval. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions at the moment? Just a quick question on when you show the building envelopes.
Yes.
That's just maximizing the front elevation. It doesn't show the depths, right? The depth will not be the same as proposed if you were to get. So while you intended to portray is if I wanted to build a house that maximized the building envelopes, this is what it would look like in the front.
I'm glad you asked. It could look like that in the front. It could look like ours. It could be different in its proportions, its layout. This pink line that I've added here over top of the yellow line that you have in your drawings highlights that at 42% you could build closer to the property lines, of course, just as tall, much more in-your-face facade, and be quite lengthy and be aligned with the neighbor to the side. Instead, we've got this huge setback here. And yes, we're longer than the existing house, but we don't have a length variance. We have a setback that's 3 meters plus versus the 1.2. That reduces scale. That reduces impact. That reduces massing. Or we could look at this, where the pink or the green, depending on how big the second floor was, could be just as long, just as wide, just as long on this side, and have potentially more impact on the immediate neighbors. And when we then look at the facade, although we're not showing, we have a rear facade, so why don't we show it? There's the rear facade. So it's similarly scaled. We're not going to a box in the back. We have a very handsomely scaled home with a gable here and a dormer here, and a big setback at 3.06 on this side at the rear, 3.26 at this side at the rear. This is a house that's saying, I'm trying to be reasonable. Yes, I have an overage. We need the overage to make this work for our family. we think we've designed a house that is going to look smaller. I believe it does do that. And these representations are simply that because there are bungalows on either side, they will be developed, I'm sure, given real estate prices and the value of living in Oakville. And when they do, they are going to be larger houses that will be much more copacetic with what we're designing.
Okay, any questions? All right, let's just see if there's anyone here that has an interest in application CAVA 198-2017 at 305 Felon Avenue. All right, it's your turn to come forward, sir, if you want to speak to the committee.
Yes, I'm Stephen Jones. My address is 1194 Priory Court in Oakville. I'm a lawyer in Oakville. I must say that I normally deal in tax and trust law, but I deal with the taxes for the woman who lives, I believe, on the other side of this property here at 309 Phelan Avenue. She's out of the country at the moment, but she just asked me if I would come here and express her opposition towards this proposed variance, and I guess opposition to the house in general. She's a single mother, lives next door in one of the smaller bungalows, as has been pointed out. Has three children. Her point is, after looking at the drawings and the proposal for the site, is of course that it is a much larger house than where she is now. That it will completely overlook her house, and particularly the backyard, and particularly where the windows are, that they will completely overlook her house and her enjoyment of her property, so that her privacy will be jeopardized. The other point that she wanted to make is that she does own the house and she doesn't plan to redevelop, so that the discussion of these much larger houses, which will eventually be put in that area next door, so the drawings show, are not a point for her, because she doesn't have the funds to redevelop the house that she has at the present time, and she's going to be living there for quite some time with her family. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Letters of support. For this, you said there were 3 letters of support.
Yeah, and I think that's all that I have.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any questions? What's your client's name at 309?
Yes, sorry. The name is Layla Fawaz, F-A-W-A-Z.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
No, I got marks here, that's fine. For some reason I didn't have it. Who else would like to speak to committee on application CAVA 198-2017 at 305 Felon Avenue? Okay, sir, your opportunity to respond.
Thank you again. I'm going to. So, in response to the concerns, we always understand privacy. We're certainly happy to meet with the neighbor, Layla Fawaz, regarding any plantings that could be made. We are showing privacy plantings on the north side adjacent to her, which would minimize any overlooks from ground floor windows. The house is set down as close to grade as you can achieve. We still have decent waterproofing. The windows that are on the ground floor could look at trees. They do look at her side. Let me go back to the side plan. They do look at her side wall, but I remind you that we're in that area. We're over 3 meters away, so that's over 10 feet plus her setback, and her setback, of course, is only approximately 3.5 feet. Yeah, so although there are some windows here on the main floor, we don't see that as being an issue. The second floor windows we can certainly look at those. We do need them for bedrooms and bathrooms, but at a 10-foot setback plus her own setback, we're really looking at her roof, because her house is somewhere here, like that. Her windows are down on the ground floor. She doesn't have second floor windows, certainly that I'm aware of. But as I said, we respect her concern for overlooks, for privacy. We believe some of that can be done with fencing and landscaping. Nice to know that she has 3 children. My clients have 2, and it's a growing family. It would be a wonderful neighborhood to move into. Whether or not Ms. Fawaz has any plans to redevelop her property, that's fine. She's allowed to. She may sell someday, and if she did, given the value of the property, somebody would likely redevelop the property, but we're certainly not forcing her into anything. This will add to the value of her property, there's no question, and although we do have one variance, I do repeat that the scale of the house is well within, in fact, smaller than what is allowed from the front, from the side, from the rear. It's only a number which is about 300 square foot overage
Sir,
on 2 floors.
when you do reply, you don't repeat what you said in the beginning.
Yes,
You just
sir.
focus on what you heard, because otherwise we'll never finish.
Yes, sir, I understand.
Thank you. Is there anything else you wish to say in reply?
Just make sure that lawyer, Mr. Stephen Jones, knows that we're prepared to sit down with the neighbor and discuss privacy issues, overlook issues,
Thank you.
anything like that that would be of concern, and that he should bring back, if he can, to the client that we don't have height issues, we don't have side yard issues. We're trying to make this palatable for both neighbors.
Okay. Members, any questions of Mr. Higgins? All right, we'll take this man to committee. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The members who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Tulowski, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I believe this is a really well-designed house. From an aesthetic point of view, from not maxing out every bylaw permission and then asking for a larger house, and from a sensitivity to the neighboring properties. Mr. Chair, I don't see how the approximately 300 square foot variance in the design that's been presented significantly alters the character, the massing of this building. I think this is an excellent example of how to do an infill house. The applicants got support from a number of the neighbors. We did hear opposition from the one neighbor, but the concern there was about the mass of the property or the house being proposed, but I don't see how, in relation to the adjoining house, how that additional 300 square feet in the way it's been presented significantly alters the massing of the house in relation to the house next door. Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to move approval of this application. Finding that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, I would make it subject to development proceeding in general accordance with the drawings provided to the committee, and that a building permit issue within 2 years.
And you reflected on the oral and written submissions that made on this application. Okay, thank you. Discussion recommendation to support subject to these conditions. Mr. Charlebois?
Mr. Chairman, having done the same review as Mr. Tulowski and looked at all this, And with respect to this particular application, as has been noted, that not only do the other variances, not only do the other sort of aspects of the building envelope comply, but in some cases, they greatly exceed what's required by the bylaw. I have to admit, I did take into account the town of Oakville's comments, and I know where they're coming from with respect to a brand-new building being created in a relatively old neighborhood, and their desire to perhaps limit the first few buildings going in, and I have to admit, I echo that desire for the most part. Speaking of echoing, I do want to echo Mr. Zaleski, and this is a fantastic presentation. If it helps, you certainly swayed me in the presentation of this. I probably would not have sided with you until you explained everything that was in here, because I didn't see that just looking at drawings and being out of the site. I also want to take into account that, you know, the fact that the immediate neighbor had concerns about privacy is certainly important to me. This would have been a little bit easier for me to go with if your neighbors had completely supported it. But having said that, I'm going to support the recommendation also.
Thank you. Any further discussions? Seeing none? Oh, you're good? Okay, so the recommendation is to approve subject to those two conditions. All those in support? No one opposed, your application being approved.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Application CAVA 199-2017 at 2025 Waters Edge Drive.
Thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of committee. My name is TJ Sakura. I'm planner and principal with Design Plan Services Incorporated. We've been retained by David Small Designs to come here tonight and present this application to you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarah. Anyone here this evening have an interest in application CAVA 199-2017 at 2025 Waters Edge Drive? Okay.
A few of them in the corner
Yep.
right there.
Okay, sir, if you could proceed with the presentation, you have 5 minutes. We'll use that clock up there. You got that? Not everyone can see it.
I will not take up the entire 5 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead.
This is a fairly straightforward application in front of the committee tonight. There's only one variance. It is to permit a reduced front yard setback of 3.87 meters where 6 meters is required. This variance largely is due to the existing condition on the site. The 3.87 meters you can see indicated here is to the corner of the porch. The main dwelling complies with the front yard setback at 6 meters. This condition has existed on this lot for likely 3 decades. The owner of the property has spoken to all of their neighbors, and nobody can ever remember any alterations to this dwelling since the original construction. So the porch has been there for likely three decades. The application is triggered because the property is undergoing a redevelopment for additions to the existing dwelling. However, the porch that is the subject of the variance is not changing. It is remaining in exactly the same place where it exists today and for the past 30 years. The application largely relates to additions above the existing garage and then a refacing of the existing dwelling. However, it won't change the location of the existing porch. Therefore, the variance is to recognize the existing condition that is on the property today. I'm just going to show you a couple of quick photos, and then that will be the conclusion of my presentation.
Your plans do say reconfigured front porch.
It's being upgraded. There's a column there now. A new column is being put in the exact same position as the existing column. Okay. The roof line is staying. The porch foundation is staying. It's just basically a facelift. This is the existing dwelling today. This is the corner right here that we were talking about. And the variance is also largely triggered by the angle of the road. So as you can see, I'm just going to zoom out here. As you can see, the dwelling has been oriented parallel to the side lot lines, and the road is on a significant angle. So the bulk of the dwelling well exceeds the front yard setback. And again, this is an existing condition that has been here for likely 30 years. The only other two pieces of information I want to give you are just two other dwellings on the street. This is 2010 Waters Edge Road. And I'm purely demonstrating that there are existing porches on the front of dwellings similar to what's existing on the subject property. This is at 2044 Waters Edge Road. Again, similar condition, porch. The road is not as skewed as it is on the subject property. However, this condition does exist throughout the neighborhood.
Okay,
That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
thank you, sir. Any questions? Okay, just have a seat, don't go too far. There was show of hands, whoever wants to come down first is welcome. You need to register your name and address for the record, and then we'll hear what you need to say, sir.
Okay. Yeah, my name's Nang Tran. I live at the east side of the neighborhood.
The address?
2019 Water Edge.
2019 Waters Edge.
Yeah.
Okay,
So anyway, occurred to I'm sorry. I speak English not that great, and if you don't understand, you ask me for
you're
repeat.
perfectly clear to us.
Yes. So anyway, for me understood, it's I live in Oakville about nearly 40 years. I always really respect all the neighbor where I live. So that's my point. And this is with the construction here, they do everything if by law meet the requirement. For me, I'm happy, I'm okay. For something they not meet the requirement by law, then there's no reason for me to say yes. And what is not a requirement? Not meet the requirement. What is in this case for me, understand it's the porch, right?
Yes.
So for the porch, I believe, I don't know why, our area is a very a privacy and big long driveway, and most senior people and a lot of people walking by because the water is a water trail road. So for me, it's for me, I don't know why. By law, requirement shall be 6 meters from the street to the porch, right? And
So, but you heard it's an existing porch.
existing, what do you mean?
In other words, it's been there for years. They're not changing.
Yes, since I've been here, it's
How
already
long,
there.
you've been there 40 years?
No, I've been there nearly 10 years.
And you've
Yeah,
seen a
before.
porch there for 10 years?
Yeah, I see that for nearly 10 years. For if the port is a keep the regional,
That's
fine with me, I'm happy.
That's what they're
And
doing.
if they do a little further, then they're already short,
Yes.
right? So why do we have to make shorter? And that,
So if they keep the porch in its original position, not making the setback any worse, then you're okay.
not cover, not thing, then I'm okay. And the other thing is, it's my driveway right beside that house, and
That's not changing, right?
my driveway not changing.
And their driver's not changing either.
Their driveway other side, so it doesn't affect me.
Okay.
But I saw in the plan
Yes?
that have quite a lot of number of window. So I don't know that's meet the require of by law.
There's no variances
requirement.
there's no other variances required.
So no? So nothing to do with
No,
me?
just to go back to your statement, the building they're building
Yeah.
meets all the laws.
Okay.
Except they have to recognize the setback to the existing porch. So they're not making it any bigger. They're gonna keep the same area away from the street.
They not cover to block the view because I concerned about safety when driving.
Well, that's
It's to
nothing.
block the
It
view.
doesn't, they may do that, but it doesn't require a variance.
Yeah.
So they're not, there's nothing to prevent them from doing that if that's what they're doing. I don't know. I think what you heard is they're taking the existing porch.
Yeah, I don't really understand too much, but if there is a, for me, concern is the require of the town is a 6 meter. Now certainly less than 4 meter from the street. Is that safety concern? I don't know. But I believe is a block the view when my driver. If my driver is not there, I don't care. It's okay with me. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Thank you for if you understanding.
No, we understood you loud and clear. Thank you very much.
That's all.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the committee? Mr. Sarah, anything you wish to add, sir? You're not covering that porch. It is what it is. You're just, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. The porch is what it is. It's not changing. There's some cosmetic upgrades to it. It's it's remaining open. I mean, you can see through the porch. There's just a column at the corner.
But it is covered.
It is a covered porch. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no views
Just
being
like your picture
blocked.
showed, yeah.
That's right.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. We'll take this matter to committee. Who would like to move a recommendation? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move a recommendation to approve this application that's set before us. It is a minor variance to recognize an existing condition with minimal architectural changes to the front porch. Having said that, I'll move the application to be approved, subject to our standard condition that the approval will expire within 2 years if the development has not proceeded and/or building permit not issued, as well as the condition requested by staff that the proposed additions and alterations to the existing dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated June 19th of 2017 as submitted.
Thank you. Discussion on recommendation? See none. All those in support? No one opposed. The application has been approved. Okay, we'll deal with application CAVA 189, 2017 at 141 Sparling Court. This is a matter that was deferred from our agenda on November 7th, 2017. Sir, can we get your name and address for the record?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Joris Kieran, Kieran Design, 100 Bronte Road, Unit 10. I'm the agent for the applicant.
Thank you. Is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 189, 2017 at 141 Sparling Court? Okay, sir, if you can have a...
He's my client.
Oh, well, okay.
So
He doesn't count in the sense that we don't need to hear from him because I think you're speaking on his behalf.
I think he's in support.
All right. Sir, can you confirm you're in support? I am in support. Okay, thank you. All right, members, I'm in your hands. If you are, as you know, our procedural bylaw allows us to dispense with a full public presentation. Is there any items of clarification, anything you wish to clarify, sir? Anything you wish to add to the application?
No, just as you know, this has been deferred. We've addressed the comments, concerns of planning, and we feel it's
Okay.
appropriate now.
We'll take this matter to committee. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Hardcastle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having reviewed the materials, visited the site, I'm satisfied that the requested variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act. I'll put forward a motion of approval, subject to 2 conditions. The first being that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated November 14th, 2017 as submitted. Second being that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued. I would note that there, other than the applicant, there were no other people present to speak to the matter, and there were no correspondence received with respect to this matter.
Okay, thank you. Discussion on recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? No one opposed, your application has been approved.
Thank you.
All right, we'll proceed to our last item, CAVA 197, 2017. This is for 2441 Lakeshore Road West, matter that was deferred from our November 21st, 2017 agenda. Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is David Mackay. I'm with MHBC Planning, 7050 Weston Road, Suite 230, Vaughan, Ontario, L4LHE7. I'm the applicant, or the planner for the applicant.
Okay, thank you. I presume everyone else that's in the audience is here because they have an interest in the application. Can I just see a show of hands? Is everyone going to speak to this, or you selected a spokesperson?
I'll speak to it.
Okay, just, okay, fair enough. So we'll proceed, sir. If you can start with your presentation, you have 5 minutes.
Yes, sir. First of all, sir, we have reviewed the staff report as well as the correspondence with regards to that has been submitted by the public, and we'd like to withdraw variance 1, dealing with the garbage container that's not fully enclosed. Our
You're
client...
going to comply with the zoning requirements.
That is correct. We'll
So
enclose
variances-
any garbage enclosure that, or incorporate it into the building design
Okay.
in the future.
So the rest of the variances, I guess staff show a degree of satisfaction.
That's correct.
So if you can, on that basis, because it seems like you had some work to do on variance number 1 since you dropped it, you can proceed with a quick presentation on the other 4. We'll listen to the concerns, and then we'll give you slightly more time once you, I believe you read a lot of the submissions anyway.
I have, yes,
And
sir.
you probably have a good flavor of the concerns.
Yes, sir. So this application relates to the redevelopment of Bronte Village Mall. This proposal went through an extensive public consultation process from 2008 until 2012, where it was approved through a settlement with the town for a phased redevelopment of the mall. As part of the proposal, there was the phasing, and this is the initial phase, which was keeping the existing Sobeys in place and relocating the drugstore. This is a plan from the original Mensa settlement. Our client is actually, who is the third owner of this property, is moving forward expeditiously and is skipping by this to move forward with the second phase of development, deal with that, which is shown on the plan. Now, the application deals, there are 2 site plan applications in process, one on the western portion of the property, which is identified as Block D and C, and that's being reviewed comprehensively by town staff. What we have today is regarding the loading dock area, primarily with regards behind the Sobeys. And as part of the settlement and as contained in the zoning bylaw, and this was a commentary throughout the some of the comments, was the access from Sovereign Street for the loading dock area. That was a part of the Mensa settlement and enshrined into the zoning bylaw. So that is not before you today, even though there's a wide variety of commentary with regards to that access in the public comments. So I'm just showing you that this is what was approved by Town Council and ultimately by the Ontario Municipal Board.
So that you're indicating that access point from Sovereign Avenue that you pointed to, where exactly where the letter E is, has been approved by the town,
Yes.
the board, and it's incorporated into a site plan agreement?
It will be, yes.
Oh, it has not yet?
Yes, we're going through it, but it's enshrined in the zoning bylaw.
Okay.
In terms of a site-specific provision. So with regards to that, and I just wanted to bring that
So there's a
forward.
zoning provision that says access off Sovereign?
That is correct.
Do you have it there? You can flash it up so we can see it?
So, sir, so it's the last provision here, provision G, motor vehicle access will only be permitted from Bronte Road and Jones. However, one access, one driveway from Lakeshore and one from Sovereign is permitted until such time as blocks 3A and 3B are redeveloped.
Okay.
And 3A and 3B are the eastern portion of the site, and redevelopment excludes additions or expansions of the existing commercial facilities. So that's how that is,
So hang
the
on, so
bylaw
it
is
says
set up.
until, so can you put that up? It says
Yep.
until redevelopment of,
Blocks 3A and 3B, and that's where the existing, that's this area here that we're dealing with. The
so
western
that's
portion, the
subject
eastern
to
portion of the site.
That's subject to redevelopment now?
No, it's not. Redevelopment, as defined by the site-specific bylaw, specifically excludes changes to the existing Sobeys parking lot, as well as additions to existing commercial or new commercial facilities. Can you provide that provision? It's at the last page. And the provision was to recognize that the redevelopment of the mall would occur in phases, and that there would be requirements for servicing of this facility in an interim period. And that's what, because the existing Sobeys is staying put, and the loading condition is staying as is, and there is a requirement for the loading condition for the new drugstore, or the relocated drugstore within that area. And sir, you can see that provision 1514-14B.
Can you zoom in? If you can, please. Point to it so we can see it.
Right there.
Okay.
Does not include either an expansion or addition to an existing commercial building. So that provision and the definition was specifically to allow for the Sobeys to occur and for the relocation of the drugstore to occur in an interim period, and to allow for access to the existing loading conditions.
I see. So if you were to whack those buildings to start fresh, then it would be caught by the redevelopment development definition.
Correct.
And then you have to deal with the sovereign access.
And then the idea was that at that point, when the property redeveloped, that there would be no access, vehicular access, from Sovereign Street.
Right.
And that was contained. Can you grab me the ultimate plan?
So if you were to, if that Sobe store was ceased to exist and it was re-tenanted as a Target,
it would be fine.
it'd be fine.
Even though Target isn't around.
No.
So in the fullness of time, the redevelopment of the mall was anticipated back in 2012 to look like this. So the actual Sobeys was to move forward towards Lakeshore, townhouses, 3-story townhouses, fronting onto Sovereign, adjacent to the park. So that's the fullness of time. So that's the phasing that was to occur.
Okay.
I thought that was appropriate, and to explain that to some of the residents who may not have been part of that original process.
No, that's very helpful for all of us as well, just to focus our lens. Thank you.
So with regards to...
Do you have extra copies of those? Because you're going to lose them at the end.
Yeah, no, I recognize that. That's fine. We can provide those to you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, so the variances that we're dealing with, obviously you can I have the, okay? So you can see that this garbage enclosure that was proposed is removed as part of the variance request. So the variances that we're dealing with deal with a new electrical room. And so right now, the electrical room is in the western portion of the mall, and so we're relocating it at this location. And it will be clad in materials that are similar at this location as the existing building, so brown brick. The second variance, so it's fully enclosed, is just to recognize that extra space that is required for the electrical room. The second variance that we're dealing with regards to this rear area is with regards to this loading corridor here. And so the proposed drugstore is at this location. It is proposed to bring forward a loading corridor up so that they can access that in inclement weather, and so that everything is contained within the building. And so there are two variances that relate to that. The first variance is regards to the setback, and that is only for that portion of the building, to bring it up to there. So then it meets the proposed screen wall, the 3-meter high screen wall at that location, and encloses fully on 3 of the 4 sides the loading and servicing area, so that it is fully screened from the street, as well from the future park that is to be redeveloped in phase 1 of the redevelopment area. The second variance deals with the purple area that's shown on that plan. Unfortunately, when we were going through the redevelopment plans, obviously we didn't get into the specific details. It was conceptual at the time. And so when they started to look at this, while we can locate a corridor, the loading corridor, fully within the commercial area, it's very narrow. So you can get a pallet through there or walk 2 people by, but it's very narrow. So the proposal is to allow for an encroachment into that O1 zone, to allow for that, that corridor to occur in full, to allow for that movement. And what we've talked to staff about and what's identified in the comments from staff is that in the fullness of time, as part of the redevelopment, we will be creating a plaza along Lakeshore with a connection through, beyond, past this retail space to the proposed park. So when this was designed, the actual retail building was actually moved further over. So the limit of the O1 zone jogs like this. So the intent, as we've described in our submissions and as described in the staff report, is that that portion in this area that's not required for the commercial any longer would be rezoned to an O1 zone as part of the redevelopment process. So it's basically a trade-off. So the town is not unduly burdened or losing any
So there's
open
no
space
net
zone.
loss?
There's no net loss.
Okay.
But it does allow for a functional loading corridor to exist in that area
So
and
this
allows
variance
for
number
that.
4 therefore is temporary until it gets rezoned?
That is correct.
So the intent is that area that's O1 now for the corridor will get rezoned as part of the process?
Yes, I believe staff referred to it as a technical variance later, or technical amendment
Right.
process.
Okay, we understand that. What about the parking variance number 2?
So the parking variance is an interesting one. It's in the original minutes of settlement and bylaw that was approved, the language was that a minimum of 1.45 parking spaces per dwelling unit be provided, of which 0.25 parking spaces shall be specifically designated as visitor. When the town...
That's for residential?
That's for residential. So when we were going through the process, we noticed that as part of the comprehensive update to the bylaw, staff have double counted the visitor spot. So the language in the site-specific provision was misinterpreted, and so it would require 1.45 spaces per unit for residential, as well as 0.25 per unit for visitor. So effectively, you're doubling up the visitor requirement. So this is really a technical fix to the bylaw that was originally approved by council. And so we thought that since we're going through this process at this time, we might as well clean up that item.
So, and the 0.25 for visitors remains?
That's correct. The 0.25 was always intended to be part of the 1.45.
So the 1.2 plus a 0.25 it keeps the standard of 1.45?
That is correct.
Okay. Question?
Just for my edification, why not do the variance and go back to the exact wording of the settlement? I don't have enough material here to calculate the math to determine whether that's the same or not the same.
Yeah.
So why did, I'm assuming that when you say to permit a minimum number of parking spaces for residential uses of 1.2,
That replaces the B.
that replaces the B.
That's right.
So the C stays.
So it adds up to the
But
1.45.
in your discussions with the town, is there, you know, in front of us here right now, was there a reason why you just didn't go and say a minimum of 1.45, of which 0.25 shall be resident?
No, it was the way that, the way the new bylaw is set up is, so we're trying to match that, how that standard of wording was.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I was not retained between 2012, when this was finalized, and up until
Okay, so
last year. So I didn't even know about this mix-up in terms of when the new bylaw was adopted in 2014.
So the old bylaw had it aggregated together in one long sentence, and the new bylaw disaggregates it, so there's no confusion.
Correct.
But during that disaggregation, they double counted the visitors parking.
Yeah, it's just I couldn't figure out if 1.2 plus 0.25 equaled 1.45.
Oh, it
plus
does.
0.25.
And if I may, just in terms of some of the concerns raised by the residents, when we were going through the redevelopment plans originally through the bylaw, the parking ratio that was established at that time was supported by a full traffic and parking analysis done by BA Consulting Group.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any questions? Okay, have a seat.
Thank you, sir.
Lights on, please, and then who would like to come forward?
Lights on, lights on.
You guys ready? Good evening. My name's Larry Rowe. I'm 2411 Sovereign Street, Unit 22.
Hang on, you're too fast for us, Mr. Rowe.
Larry Rowe, 2411 Sovereign Street.
Sovereign,
I think
okay.
you just saw that street up there. Unit 22. All right.
Okay.
We're 22. I came here with two concerns. I have one now, thank you very much. So the garbage was a concern for us, and I'm very pleased to see that removed. The third one, what I called the setback, but minimum yard, I guess is the terminology here, encroaching even closer to our homes is a concern. In the town comments, something was mentioned called a living vegetative wall. It is completely inadequate today. We see dumpsters and trucks from our front doors every day. To rely on that as proof of additional coverage for this reduction of the setback, I don't think it's right. The retaining wall that's by the loading dock is about 1.5 meters high. Again, we see and hear trucks all day long shunting in and out of there. So would like to see, if you're going to go forward with this, would like to see at least a provision for a higher either living vegetative wall or a noise abatement wall or whatever you want to do to give us some more privacy in our properties, not infringe on the quality of our lives.
Ms. McHale, this is currently going through site plan? Havillage. Don't change your name on me. My apologies. This is currently undergoing through site plan?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman of the committee, there is a site plan application currently under review. As the applicant indicated, there's an east and a west side. The living wall, as was provided in one of the presentations, there is the buffer to the loading area. The variance is specifically to a physical part of the building that is being extended up into that portion. The wall itself was part of the discussions in the settlement, which I will allow the applicant to discuss with you more fulsomely, but it is not part of this application, so it's the location of it.
No, we get that. We understand that, yeah, sorry. Just making that point that you want to reduce the setbacks, there's got to be some compromise here. Yeah, absolutely. Question for the committee on the entrance from Sovereign. I understand the special provision 151414, whatever it was that was approved. I'm not sure if that was the intent of it, because the wording is, it gives the intention, the wording, it gives me the impression that it was going to be a temporary entrance until blocks B and C or C and D or whatever it is were being developed.
Redeveloped.
Redeveloped.
Was defined not to exclude this.
Now it sounds like they're not doing that, potentially. I don't know when that provision was made. It just seems a little bit of a shell game here to me, but maybe he can explain that.
They said if you're going to redevelop this, you know, we're not going to take your access away if you keep the existing shells of the buildings and repurpose them. But if you're going to knock them down, and as you saw, to provide for row houses on Sovereign Street, then that's a game changer in terms of the sovereign access. That's the way I read it. It wasn't meant to require the elimination of Sovereign Avenue access on repurposing of the existing building or changing its...
Well, okay, maybe others are going to speak to this, but you see it as an if, I saw it as a when redeveloped, you see it as if redeveloped?
Well, it's either or, but redevelopment, as you saw, is defined in the bylaw to exclude what's happening today. If the buildings are whacked...
When was that bylaw struck, sir, that special provision? Do you have any idea what the date of that was?
2012, so it's fairly fresh. When did you move in here, sir?
When did we move in? 5 years ago, yeah.
About the same time this thing got settled.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it has been up in the air for well over a decade.
Any questions, Mr. Rowe? Okay, thank you. Who else would like to speak to the committee?
I guess Susan Rowe, Unit 22. Why not? Both of us. I guess my understanding, the opening that's going to the loading dock entrance from Sovereign, that's to be an interim solution, and that's based on the redevelopment of the other portion of the property.
The loading dock?
The corridor from Sovereign.
No, I don't think it's an interim. I think it's a permanent solution.
It's permanent? Oh, it's permanent. Oh, okay.
So what's happening is they're internalizing the loading and offloading, right?
So they're turning. So there's going to be an entrance on
internal corridor
from Sovereign.
No entrance on Sovereign, but I think if that plan goes up, you'll see it.
There is an entrance. Oh, 100% sure, there's an entrance.
Right, so we'll put it up there.
Okay.
Oh, no, there is an access point, but in terms of the
What
building
does-
itself.
What's the difference between an access point and an
Driveway.
entrance then? A driveway.
A driveway.
Right, for transport trucks. For 28, 40 feet long trucks.
Whatever you can get in there.
Right, yeah.
I don't know what the turn circles are.
These aren't cars.
Special provision again.
Mr. Mackay, can you put up the elevation for
I
that
know
side?
that.
Yes, sir.
So there's the elevation. There's that door. Can you point to that door? The new corridor?
Sorry, the new corridor is at this location right there.
Okay. And is there a door that opens there?
It'll face east.
Right,
into the
can you put
loading
up the site plan? Can you put up the site plan that shows that purple site plan that you had? So there you go.
So the door to the
So what
loading
were
quarters
you
right
looking at before? Put the arrow what we were looking at before.
there. We were looking at this
Okay.
position here.
And there's no doors looking from the street onto that facade?
No, there's not.
Okay, and then that attaches to that wing wall there, the noise wall?
What's that?
That's the driveway entrance.
Okay.
That's what I thought, that's what I'm talking about.
She's referring to the driveway entrance.
I'm not talking about the door,
Right.
I'm talking about the driveway.
So Mrs. Rowe, do you see what happens is the corridor comes right up and meets that wing wall?
Mm-hmm.
And there's no doors that open onto Sovereign, but you need to get to there's a door opening internally where the garbage enclosures are, where they show there.
Right,
There's a door that opens there, and it's all enclosed with that wing wall.
right,
Okay, so whatever happens there, the trucks come in, however they get in.
magically,
Well, however they get in.
by that driveway.
And then all goods movement is internalized in that proposed corridor.
I guess my issue is the transport trucks on Sovereign. It's only 2 lanes. There's some parking on there right now.
I
We
know.
have kids who play in our parkette.
They're not changing that. You're asking them to close it. It's something that is beyond our control.
Right.
You need
But
to
I
do-
guess I have a problem with it being determined as interim. This development's been going on for years, to my understanding.
Right.
It's been held off for years, at least 8 years. So if that exists in the interim, what's the definition of interim? 10 years,
Well,
20
the
years?
zoning bylaws anywhere in Ontario don't require you to do anything. They just permit you to do something.
Oh, okay.
They can't force you to redevelop. They empower you to redevelop, and it's your choice on different factors.
Right. I just think it's really a shame that this residential street's going to be used for transport trucks now.
Right.
It's
And that's
a shame.
something- And that's something that was litigated in 2012, and
Oh.
we're not empowered to change that.
Okay. I'm going to have to...
Okay, who else? Yes, sir. Go.
I'm not a sir, I'm a lady.
No,
Oh,
sorry, there was someone else that raised their hand back there, but no, I didn't realize you'd come down to speak. By all means, you're there.
I'm Debbie DeCroce, Unit 15, 2411 Sovereign Street. My concern is, have any of you been down there to see what Sovereign Street looks like?
Yes.
Okay. And so you know how narrow that street is?
Yes.
And we're going to have trucks. Again, I understand that there's clearly nothing that anybody here can do about it, but what can we do about it as residents? What can we do? There's the east side of Sovereign has been designated a no-truck zone. We are surrounded by Bronte and Jones and Lakeshore Road that are, Bronte's a highway, Lakeshore Road's a highway, and Jones is now commercial, south of Sovereign. Why can't those be used as entrances?
So here's our problem. We're empowered under the Planning Act to make a decision on minor variances. We don't offer advice. We make a decision. We take your concerns to the extent they're related and relevant to the variances, and then we make a decision. The advice and the relief that you're seeking is best initiated with the local councillor to have those discussions.
Well, our counselor doesn't want to get involved.
Well, again, we don't get involved in that.
But he was voted in to support us.
Well, again, let's not detract from what we're here empowered to do. We can listen to you, and we understand your concerns and complaints, but we can't help you in terms of closing access points, which has been approved by other authorities beyond us. So it's not, we haven't made that decision, and we can't change that
Right.
decision. But if there was a variance to change something that was approved, like there is today, then we can engage that discussion. But there's nothing before us today. in terms of a variance that deals with that access point that allows us to make any contribution.
So if we have a counselor who's not willing to represent us, what do we do?
I talk to the mayor, talk to other councilors. I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not saying it's easy.
I don't know I think you're all much younger than I am, but I remember when sales tax was a temporary measure too.
Well, yes.
So here we have another temporary measure in place.
That's true.
That's
Like
scary.
I said earlier, zoning bylaws don't require you to redevelop. They permit the redevelopment. They're permissive in their nature.
The other question I have is a lot of this was done without the neighborhood knowledge. Like, we're just kind of handed a done deal.
I don't understand that comment, but how does it help us with the variances?
Well, how does it help us as residents?
When did you move in?
I moved in 10 years ago.
So there was a process in 2012, as you heard.
I saw that fancy schmancy thing that had nothing to do with an entrance off of Sovereign.
Oh, okay.
So between that and now an entrance off of Sovereign, how did that happen without our knowledge?
Well, I can't speak to history, but that's facts. That's what's been approved through a settlement process.
So you're saying we have to go to the mayor?
No, I'm saying you can.
The mayor
engage
doesn't live in my neighborhood.
I'm suggesting you can engage whatever process you think most appropriate. We don't offer advice, we make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
That's our statutory role.
Okay.
Any questions? Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I'm Charles Cruikshank, 2451 Sovereign Street, and I just wanted to make a clarification. Everyone's been talking about this entrance off Sovereign Street and closing it off or whatever. That does not exist today.
Right.
That is a new entrance.
Yes.
So currently, all the access into Sobeys takes place presumably off Jones. So I just don't understand, and I don't recall when this particular piece was approved. So I just don't understand why the existing situation couldn't continue.
Well, again.
I know, I understand it's outside of your
It's been
area
approved.
at the moment, yeah.
What can we do? We don't have any power to reverse something that's been approved.
Yeah, no, I
We
understand.
can only deal with the matters that are before us. You know, as much as your concerns are all valid, we're not discounting them, but our hands are tied. To suggest that we can do something would be misleading you down a path that we'd be dishonest.
No, I just wanted to clarify, because everyone's been talking about this existing access from Sovereign. It doesn't exist today. It's something that's been proposed as this development continues.
Mr. Mackay, was there a board decision that speaks to this?
There was a board decision, yes.
Does it speak to the access points?
I don't recall if there's specific language in the board decision about
What is there in the public domain that you may offer to one of the residents so they can catch up on some history?
There is the board decision, there is the minutes of settlement that goes.
Are they
along with
public?
that. Yes, they are.
Okay,
They're attached
so
to
can
the-
I suggest this, Mr. Cruikshank, that you exchange emails with Mr. Mackay and he'll send it to you. And then you can distribute the email to whom you think is most appropriate. That gives you a little bit of context on how this got approved. You know, again, for the sake of repeating myself for clarity, is if there was something before us that we can engage in this discussion, we would not discount your submissions.
Okay.
Okay. So if you could do that before the end of the things, that way everyone is on the same page in terms of the past history, and then you can take whatever counsel you need from that.
Okay.
Any question from Mr. Cruikshank? Cruikshank? Sorry.
Cruikshank.
Thank you. Okay, apologize for. Okay, anyone else wishing to speak to the committee?
Unit 20, 2411 Sovereign Street, Maggie Smith. I just would like clarification as to the size of that entrance on Sovereign Street, please. Is it big enough for a tractor trailer to go through, or is it simply a walk-through?
Oh no, I imagine it's big enough, but we'll ask Mr. Mackay to respond to that specific technical question.
You said that there's nothing you can do, and I get that, that's fine. This decision was made in 2012. As a newer resident, do we not have the right to go back and question that, because now it's affecting our quality of life?
We're not suggesting you can.
I'm not asking for advice, I'm just asking, what is the process with regard to something being approved?
Again, you're more than welcome to do whatever your conscience says you should do, but it's not before us.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying, you or people like yourselves would have approved it at one point.
I would suggest that you talk to our planner here or the planning department and,
Okay.
and have that discussion. Again, engage your counselor or the
Well,
mayor.
we've
whoever.
tried that.
Well,
But that's nothing to do with you, I get that.
that's all I can offer as a starting point.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the committee? Sir, you don't get a second shot at it.
I just wanted to reiterate that.
It's a repeat or reiterate?
Okay.
All right, quick. We'll give you.
Again, referring to variance number 3, the reason I bring the living vegetative wall up, it was brought up by the town in their comments as being adequate. I'm saying it's inadequate.
No, we heard you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Mackay?
Yes, sir. So with regards to the living wall, I think there's a bit of misunderstanding with regards to it. Because the Mr. Rowe had mentioned about the existing condition, which is there's a berm there with landscaping on there, and then it's the current loading condition back of the mall there. That's there. So what staff are recognizing, and what is on the drawings, is this screen wall at this location. Sorry, it's a little dark. Which is a 3-meter high concrete and brick-clad wall.
That's the wing wall.
That's the wing wall.
That's
the
the noise wall, is it?
The noise and the screen wall. And to soften it, we've put plantings on it. That's why they're saying it's a living wall.
Okay.
So it's not just plantings. It's actually plantings with vines on on that facade. And that will be new. This one. So that is located in this location here for this new loading facility.
Okay.
The other...
There was a question about the width of the driveway access.
Yes, we've reviewed that at some length with BA Group, who's still involved with the project, and it does allow for truck movements to fully access that area without any difficulties.
So they come in and they back up?
That's correct. It's a right-in only.
Right-in only?
And then they exit out of Jones.
How many trucks can go in and out of there? Like, can they pass each other, or are they going to be lined up on Sovereign waiting to get in?
So, Mr. Mackay, can I suggest that if there's been a traffic report done on this?
There has been a traffic movements report.
Is that something that's public?
I believe it's been submitted, but if it hasn't, we can provide
Okay.
it.
Just to answer your question, connect with the planning department, and they could probably let you see the traffic report that gives you the turn movements and the volumes.
Thank you.
If it's available.
Yes. With regards to the access, I do want to point out, in terms of the nature of the site, that there is an existing access to Sovereign at this location, which is used to access the back of the property.
Right.
And so it was in recognition as part of the redevelopment that would go from west to east, that there would still be a need for access to a loading facility at the eastern end of the site. And that's why there was a provision for that access to be put in place.
That's maintained? That will be maintained?
No, that's being removed.
That's being closed.
That's being closed.
So there's a recognition, you got to service the property from the rear.
Yes, exactly, because ultimately they want everything internalized
Right.
and nothing to be along Lakeshore, which is a lot of it is today,
So
in
you
terms of
come
the
in,
parking.
you come in, make a right turn, and then you back up, and everything then is protected by the noise wall and the wing wall, and then you make a right coming out.
That is correct.
Okay.
The other component, and I bring this up just for the residents, I can talk to them, but also for committee. As I said at the beginning, this went through a very extensive public process. There was a public meeting with close to, I'd say, 300 or 400 people attending back in 2008, 2009. There were consultations with the Bronte Village BIA, the Residents Association at the time, and at the end of the day, all of those parties came on side with the settlement, with the town, and were in agreement with it. The board hearing that actually happened in this very room was attended by 3 persons, not from the town or from the applicant side, and all were in favor.
Okay.
So,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Mackay? All right, we'll take this matter to committee. Who would like to move a recommendation on the revised application eliminating variance 1? We're dealing with only variance 2, 3, and 4. Thank you, Mr. Charlemagne. Go ahead.
No, I'm just kind of waiting. Mr. Chairman, having conducted my site visit and reviewed the applicant's written submissions as well as the town's written staff report, also taking into account the comments presented by the applicant here this evening, as well as the questions and submissions from the public, and noting that there was a variety of objections to this particular proposal, many of them centered on, as you noted, an entranceway over which this committee has no ability to amend. I'm going to put forward a motion that this particular variance does meet all 4 tests under the Planning Act. I will note that variance 1 was dropped, leaving only variances 2, 3, and 4. And I believe that the explanations provided by the applicant certainly clarified the reasons for accepting these particular variances. So I'm going to make it subject, bear with me, subject to the condition that the proposed development be constructed in general accordance with the final approved site plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services. And I'm also going to make it subject to the condition that this approval will expire 2 years from the date of this decision if the proposed development does not proceed or a building permit is not issued.
Okay, thank you. Discussion recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? No one opposed. The application approved. Okay, we have the minutes of November 21st. Who would like to move it? I think we were all here. Mr. Hardcastle, moving the minutes. Discussion on the minutes as presented? Seeing none, all those in support? No one opposed. Those have been approved. All right. You want to continue with adjournment, Mr. Hardcastle? Motion to adjourn? All those in support? Adjourned at 9:03.
Okay, I have no printers, so I have to go upstairs.
Okay, we shall wait.
Great. No, I'm off upstairs, so I'm gonna be a while. I'm here. The dot? Oh, no. Nobody knows what that means. They do. It's just